Hello, hello.
Hi, Rob.
Hi,
Hi,
Marcia.
Joel. Everybody, I'm so pleased to be here today with somebody that I consider a real change maker, an important story he has to share with us. His name is Rob Hough, and he's an Irishman. Rob has had quite an interesting story, full of ups and downs. He's been traveling through challenges and surmounting those challenges and shining and enjoying life. And today we want to share the story of how Rob has been able to navigate the challenges in his life. And we want to bring you to the point that he has reached in the last 2 years, which is one where he has really tapped into what he thinks is his ultimate purpose and tapping into his passion so that every day doesn't feel like a challenge, it feels fulfilling. So, Rob, welcome.
Thank you, Marcia. Lovely introduction.
Thank you. So, I would love to start with you sharing with us a little bit about yourself, where you started, what your childhood was like, and maybe a little bit of how you came to in the direction of where you are now.
Yeah, of course. Firstly, thank you for having us on this Changemaker series. I'm quite humbled to be here right now. So yes, I'm just thinking over the last few days, is the first time I've actually been asked this question, and it's kind of taken me back and challenged me in ways and stirred up some stuff inside. So born and raised in Dublin, Ireland, the eldest of three boys. And my childhood, I've mixed emotions and memories of my childhood. Many happy, but equally many difficult, challenging memories and experiences. I guess my parents brought us up very well. They gave us the best of opportunities, and they really did love us and care for us. But they had their own challenges, and that ultimately led to a separation at a young age. And that, impacted us in ways that I guess maybe over the last 10 years, I'm only really starting to comprehend and understand. And I suppose, when I was a kid, growing up and going to school, that was really difficult for me. I wasn't really a good fit for the system, and I didn't really I never really felt I fitted into the school. I wasn't academic, and I was probably in my mid-teens. I went for a diagnosis, and I had some kind of speech and learning disability, and speech and language, yes. And ADHD wasn't, in Ireland, it wasn't fairly talked about, it wasn't prevalent. So that didn't really come up in my diagnosis until more recent years. And so, having said that, as a kid, in school, I loved the social aspect. I loved the sport, and I was a bit of a messer. And that got me into trouble quite a bit, and within that, I was quite an angry kid, and that angriness, that spilled through into my adulthood life, and that was very confusing for me at the time to figure out, where is this anger coming from, and so. When I left school, I suppose I started to find my real flow in life early on with music. I went to do a sound engineering course in Birmingham 2 years, and that I found my passion for electronic music, and that turned into DJing on the club scene, producing music on the radio, running a record label, running events, teaching other people how to make music. And I had, a good run at it for the best part of maybe 7 or 8 years. Then somehow my confidence dropped, and also my hyperacusis, although I didn't know what the hyperacusis, the oversensitive hearing, that kind of kicked in, but I wasn't aware of it. And I tried something else out. I was really interested in cooking. And so I became a chef. I went to chefing school, worked in a hotel and restaurant. I had a couple of years there. But, again, my temperament, my attitude wasn't a good fit at that particular stage of my life. And that ultimately came to a crisis point when I quit the chefing, and I was then unemployed for almost a year. And I had a really bad accident, which destabilized my whole living for 7 years after that. But what happened as a result of that and many other things, I had broke up with a long-term girlfriend, and that coincided with the split from a group of friends. And so all those things happening at the same time, I hit rock bottom. I hit as low as I've ever been in my whole life. And but ultimately, when you go so low, the only way is up. If I'm happy to say that I have that fight in me. And that was my beginning. The next 10 years really was my beginning, my pathway into spirituality, trying to make sense of my place in this world and understanding how I'm actually wired. And, within all that is the healing of the wounded child. And ultimately, these last 10 years, I've been exploring, adventuring, finding more meaning and purpose and balance. And I guess the last 2 years has been when I answered that calling. And that was after I had another major awakening, you could say, very different to the one when I was 30, when a friend of mine, Sean, who passed away, and I had a transpersonal experience, like unimaginable, hard to even explain, but it was beautiful. It was absolutely incredible, and just totally changed my perspective, Marcia, on how I'm living in this world, how I need to show up, and how I need to honor my truth. And that the last 2 years has been really exercising that. And that has, I suppose, after 10 years working in the corporate world, I was over in a retreat in Iceland, and that was a catalyst. I had a kind of aha moment where I found that courage and I found that confidence to take that step into the unknown and give it a shot and start redesigning my life, start tuning into what I wasn't honoring within. And that has all culminated in what is now soulsync.life. Where, yes.
I have so many questions based on, that's like really rich, really so much to explore. It feels like I have 3 hours that I need to interview you to learn about all that I would like to learn. I want to come back to SoulSync, but before we move away from your mental health challenges, because speaking from my context, and I am guessing that there are many, many people around the world who might have experienced this. Sometimes people feel that if they are facing mental health challenges, it's something to be hidden because it's something that makes them weaker. And that Achilles heel can be the undoing of the respect they get professionally, of their acceptance into society, into family, etc., right? And So mental health challenges really, to me, I feel, spark you figuring out how you perceive yourself, and give you an opportunity to decide. First, you live in it without being diagnosed, and I'm assuming that that is going to be challenging, especially if you're a child, which is what you were going through. So I'd love to hear how you felt as a child, having these issues but not having been diagnosed. And then once you had the diagnosis, how did that make you feel? And how did you manage things going forward?
Yeah, well, actually, the diagnosis happened fairly late in my life, fairly recently, in the last 3 or 4 years.
So what was childhood like, given that you would have been dealing with these challenges in school, interacting, maybe it caused behavioral issues because you kind of pointed to that, some attitude and behavioral issues that then went on to get you punished a lot, judged a lot, and angry.
Yeah, they showed up as, you know, I was insecure with who I was. I didn't know who I was. You know, for the most part of my life, I was having an identity crisis. I was unaware of what was going on up there. You know, I had no reference point. You know, I'm only in this body, in this mind. And so for me, I thought, you know, everybody, well, to a certain, no, I felt in many ways not smart, stupid, unintelligent. As a result of school, you know, when you're slapped across the head and told to stop daydreaming, you know, this is something that impresses on your subconscious as if you're doing something wrong, but actually you're not doing anything wrong. This is actually how I'm wired and how I'm supposed to show up. It's just I'm not fitting into the system that way.
I've heard from some students that when that happened, in my time, they used to make a cap out a newspaper, a cone cap, put it on your head, make you go in front of the class, face the wall, and that was a dunce cap. So these are the things that don't just tell you you are not right. They tell you they didn't tell you you made a mistake. They tell you that you yourself are not right. Yeah. That you don't belong, and that changes your identity. And it takes a hell of a strong person to reframe that.
Thank you.
So I celebrate that you have been able to move out of all those judgments and the mental models that get embedded there, right? It gets concretized. You have to really hammer away to break up that whole mental model.
You do.
And replace it. So how have you taken your diagnosis, and how have you felt how did you feel when you got the diagnosis, and then what did you do to move from there? What tools and techniques did you use to manage your issues?
Yeah, so I think when I started my early 30s, I unconsciously was going on this kind of journey of self-discovery, and changing my lifestyle as a result of the injury that I had. I wasn't aware of my hyperacusis at the time, and the ADHD. I just still thought that I had a learning disability, and I wasn't as smart as the rest. But then I guess as the years progressed through, indirectly, I was actually healing my ADHD in some sense, because I was very interested in meditation, exploring psychedelics, plant medicine, all different kind of states, changing your state of consciousness. I was, and mindfulness, and all these little things actually indirectly were helping me become more present. And you know, I found that when I did eventually, maybe when I was around 3 or 4 years ago, when I did find out that it was ADHD, that I had probably more ADD instead of taking out the hyperactivity, although was probably more hyper when I was a kid.
Mm.
But when I got two diagnoses, but Marcia, I didn't even need a diagnosis. When I immediately started reading into this, I started like, oh, I'm a dead ringer for this, like, you know, and something quite amazing happened, not immediately, but just over time. And I started realizing that, okay, I fit the characteristics of this wiring, this conditioning. And I felt vindicated. I looked back on my life. I looked back on my behavior. I looked back on my impulsiveness and my lack of attention and my selfishness and all these things. I started to stop giving myself a hard time. And there's magic in that.
In finding compassion for yourself, there's magic in that.
Yeah, you know about that, Marcia. And that is such an important part of the journey, is letting go, like getting out of your head and understanding first how this is happening, looking back at your conditioning and the world and how that impresses on you as well. And surrendering to it, you know, surrendering to, okay, I am wired like this. How can I work within these limitations? And my life really started to become alive when I started accepting myself and realizing, okay, I've got something to work with here, you know? And I experimented and not presently, but still am over the last 2 years with ADHD medication, Ritalin. And I'm having, you know, mixed results with that. When I first went on it, I was still actually in work at the time, but I was in a job where it really wasn't serving me. It wasn't honoring my soul. I was in that job for the wrong reasons, which we can go into if it comes up. But I started the medication, and then all of a sudden I started becoming really good at my job. All of a sudden my focus, my productivity went up, my anxiety went down, and this also in parallel, I can't just put it all to the medication. I had stopped drinking. I had started eating better food. I started doing all these things. So it's very hard, Marcia, when you're doing so many different things to attribute, oh yeah, it was definitely the ADHD medication. What I've learned about the ADHD medication, and I'm still very much learning and experimenting, is that some part of you is blocked off, some part of your heart, and I believe it blocks off access to the unconscious, not just ADHD medication, depression, all these types of stuff. And I'm really looking in on this, and it's not just reading the literature and the research that's out there, it's actually experimenting with it myself. And that's, you know, that takes time, because you have all these other different areas through supplementation, through exercise, through meditation, mindfulness, and through sleep. And it's hard, like, you know, we've only so much time in a day to really make sense of all the things that we put into our body.
So it sounds like you are saying that right now you're not on the ADHD medication, but you are still taking some medication for your hyperacusis.
These headphones.
Okay, that's noise reduction.
Yes, these are specialized bone conducting headphones, but I for my hyperacusis, just for anybody who might be listening in on the playback of this, hyperacusis is an oversensitive hearing condition, that there's still very unknown what exactly causes it. But I'm going to take a guess that it's one part. You know, when I was DJing, playing music back in my 20s, I was quite impulsive, and I can see my dad's listening there, so he'll concur too. I probably overdid the volume, and that had an impact on my ears, no doubt. But the other part of it is how much of that is psychological, and I believe that a good part, most of the healing that could come from this is reframing the condition, as we were discussing before our call here. And, you know, within the limitation of hyperacusis, which has, let's say, prevented me from, I've had to reinvented myself with all the conditions that I've had and the accidents. But, you know, limitations are opportunities in disguise. And that's just, you know, this comes from the imagination. Everything comes from the imagination, but it's so powerful, that alone. So let me give you an example of how I'm using my hyperacusis as a limitation, how it impacts me in my creative process. So I have, let's say, a certain allowance of time before it gets inflamed, the sensitivity around my head. So I could be writing music and in full flow with what I love, and then all of a sudden I'll start feeling the pain, and that might happen typically on average maybe after an hour or two. It just depends on so many other different factors. But what I've learned to do is, first of all, reframe how I can use this feature of reframing limitation, putting a limitation on my creative process to actually increase overall the quality of my creative process. So I have to take the foot off the gas when I'm in flow, and I have to compartmentalize my time to prevent myself from overdoing it. And
it sounds like you're saying that you set yourself manageable goals for each session, and you're very focused on getting that done in this session, knowing that you have a window to get it done in.
Yes, what we both learned on the habit of ferocity, Marcia. So yeah, and actually that was a really key part that we might go into, but it's actually taking that knowledge. As long as I have another coach, Mike Monday, who's been instrumental with piecing all this together for me as well. But it's putting in these constraints, and what happens there is it forces you then to be extremely focused, and that when you're doing something that you love, that's effortless. That automatically just takes shape. And what I found is the results are just significantly better when I have a deadline and I know that I have to cut off at a certain time. And this is quite, this is what's got me interested in the coaching side of things, because the limitations that we put on ourselves to optimize the creative process, I guess, having a crazy schedule or a physical limitation like myself for me, there's always ways around it. They're not excuses anymore. It's all just a matter of reframing what the problem is, and then carving out time and building the habit around that. And that's hard. It's not as simple as that, as we both know, but that is what I want to do ultimately, is because I can't I can't make it, well, not at this point in time until I fully heal, but I can't go out, and I'd love to just go out and do this full time, but actually I get a lot of satisfaction now. What I've realized, it's forced me into thinking more at a grand scale of how I can contribute towards imparting my wisdom on other people through all the many kind of areas that I've managed to heal.
I'm listening to you, and two things stick out to me, and they seem to be the banner statements that have been coming to me in so many ways in life. I'm looking at you and I'm seeing, I am worthy, I am enough. And really, I feel that many of us, if not all of us, we live our lives to discover that. We don't feel like we are enough. We compare ourselves to other people. Social media posts all the high points of everybody's life most times, and you compare your dreary life to their curated perfection. And that's not a fair comparison, right?
No.
So it's very, very hard for people in general, I think, to look at that comparison and feel that they can even muster up the courage to show who they truly are, because they look like they have so many dings and so many imperfections. How are you going to show that to people, knowing that it doesn't come close to what other people are showing? But I feel that showing your truth is the greatest service that you can give to yourself as well as to the world. And so the other banner statement is progress, not perfection.
Yes.
You do not have to be perfect. All you have to do is take one step in the direction of your passion and your purpose. And so before I pass back over to you, I just want to celebrate that you have found a way to say, here are my imperfections.
Yeah.
And understanding me, understanding my limitations, understanding my challenges. Let me figure out which threads of me I can weave together to give a tapestry to the world. And if I only have the ability to do it in 1 hour, so be it. But 1 hour of me living fully in purpose is worth more than 24 hours of me not doing that, because alignment is all. So I celebrate that so much, Rob. That really is the purpose of this interview series, to let people have reminders from so many regular guys and gals around the world. That you, wherever you are, whatever country, whatever small place you see that to be, it's not small.
No.
It is the ultimate lesson that I feel we all need to learn. And so thanks for coming on to share that. So let's shift over to passion. And you basically, you told me that the last 2 years have been the best time of your life. You really think you've come into being you in the last 2 years, because you have tapped into, and I suspect you have been living in a version of life where you connect with your passion every day. How are you doing that? And also you work to help others find their passion and walk the path to fulfill that for themselves. So how are you doing it for yourself and helping others to do it for themselves?
Yes, excellent question, Marcia, and thank you for so eloquently framing the last piece. So for me, I guess it all started with a coaching course actually with Mike Monday, which was my first taste of understanding the mechanics of how flow might be working. Yeah, I had heard, being in the zone, what that meant and what that felt like, but actually understanding to a certain extent the neurochemistry and how, we learned this on the habit of ferocity, our different flow profiles. And I'm a crowd pleaser. And as Steve Kotler promotes, that this is where you should spend most of your time, because this honoring that character, that person, is what's going to bring you most fulfillment in life. And so for me, that was just the start of my actual journey into practicing my passion more, but actually figuring it out as well on that particular quest. It's like, okay, so I have this passion. It feels a little bit selfish, me just going off and trying to make music and making that my kind of career. But that wouldn't have worked anyway because I have the limitations. And so then we learn, you know, how to turn your passion into purpose. And that for me was, that opened up the floodlights, and it was like, okay, that really forced me into, okay, how can I still live a life in flow where I have a balance of exercising my creative expression through music? How can I turn this into something more meaningful where I can inspire and help other people along their journey with whatever creative quandaries, blockages they might have, and help them navigate that terrain? Because ultimately, I do feel creativity is such an intrinsic part of our nature. And there, I see so many people out there, so many friends that are just caught up in the 9-5, but no fault of their own. It's just how society has, society's framed in a certain way. And it's pretty much like this across the world, where, you know, we're not actually, creativity is not a subject in school. You know, idea generation, use of your imagination is not really encouraged. And and so that's where I really, that's kind of, let's say, my MTP at changing the systems and at a government level. But that's a good few years down the line. But at the moment, right now, it's working with other people and finding here, taking a holistic approach. You know, I've quite a lot of experience through working, helping people with mental health. I also do some volunteer work in that arena. I've, you know, studied counseling and psychotherapy, and all these kind of domains are all kind of coming together, fusing together now. And it's still figuring itself out all the time. You know, I'm just entering the world of coaching. And while I am putting myself out there as a creativity flow coach, what does that mean? You know, ultimately, I want to focus specifically on finding anybody who wants to recover or discover what's their creative side. And I feel that we're now in a time, and it's the shift that's going on in the world, where people have that opportunity now. People are more, I see it so much more, people are stepping out of their comfort zone and asking themselves really profound questions about how they're showing up in this world. What are they doing to contribute? And creativity can come in so many different forms, as you know. And it doesn't have to be necessarily in the arts. It can be something that is going to solve a problem that's going to be useful.
So I'm hearing so many people asking, especially because we have the added pressure of the COVID and the lockdown and the stay at home. I guess all that external pressure is leading you to look within, to figure out where do you find peace and where do you find some kind of feeling of being held and protected, because it's so scary every day. So I think so many people that I have spoken to, so many of my students, clients, whatever, have said, is this all there is? I'm busy all of the time. I'm running this race all of the time, especially the 9-to-5 kind of person. Is this all there is? Do I have to look forward to this day in, day out until retirement?
It's crazy, isn't it?
You know, there's something inside me and it's knocking really hard to get out. But I haven't given it permission, because this is expected of me. This is the path I'm meant to tread if I'm a responsible human. Yeah. 9-to-5. So to people who have that question, they may not even realize it's a question. It's just a hole that you sense. Yeah. What would your advice be?
Yeah, it's there's so many layers to that. I suppose the first step is to, you know, find a support network. Depending on if somebody is like, okay, yeah, I really should um, explore this art. I really should play a musical instrument. I really should start writing this book I always said I was going to write. You know, support is so integral to the whole process. And
support doesn't have to come from outside. It could be you supporting yourself, like writing that book or spending that time being creative.
absolutely, absolutely.
I'd love to do just one statement of extension on what you're saying, because it's related. It's set aside 1 hour of your day for you. To express yourself, to put yourself out there, and don't feel that you're losing touch with who you are. That's perhaps the most important hour you can spend.
Yeah, absolutely. I take 3 of them every morning.
What?
I take 3 of those hours before I tune into the outer world, you know, and it's so important. Now, obviously, I've redesigned my life to accommodate that. But you know, for people that have busy schedules and are still in the 9 to 5 and have families, I understand it's really difficult for those people to carve out an hour. But start small, you know, start with, you know, 15 minutes, whatever that looks like, whether it's a meditation or it's your morning pages where you're just journaling whatever comes out. There's so many things that you can do just to tap into the unconscious. Whatever is in there will come out if, you know. And here's another thing I'm not sure if I touched upon that I think is really important, and it's one of the motivations and think in not so much a direct sense, but it's something I really feel passionate about. It's faith. It's having whether that faith comes up in religion or spirituality. And I think it was one of your guests I was listening to, the artist, the writer who did
Paul Antonio Atong, the calligrapher.
Yeah, that was really I think he spoke to that as well, very well, where it's and I didn't have all these years, and that's the other thing, you know. I didn't have faith. I didn't have faith in me, but I didn't have faith in some higher power. And I think it's so integral. And I think it's one of the purposes of life to find faith. And everything, once you find that faith and you build that trust and you surrender into that, you don't have to try and explain it or understand it, because it's unexplainable to a larger extent. And you know, there's lots of tools and techniques to get to that place. But for me, that's been an important part of my journey.
Okay. So Rob, I would love to invite our guests to have a chat with you. But before I do that, is there anything else, any last message you'd like to share before we go to a little Q&A with our guests?
Yeah, I guess maybe if I can give a plug to my first live performance.
Of course you can. And you should tell me your company name too, because I cut you off in the introduction before you got to tell us a little bit.
Yes, so soulsync.life is the name of the website. Soulsync is a place where I demonstrate my creative expression through telling stories over using music. And these stories are very personal, and but we're all in these stories. We all can relate to them. And it's using, you know, stories, spoken word, collaborating with others. And that's a big thing of SoulSync. It's very much a collaborative effort, because with these limitations, I can't do this myself. And I was very caught up in my head for the best part of my life, not asking for help, you know. Just ask for help because we're also interdependent as humans.
So definitely more about just music. It's creative expression that you do, because you said spoken word as well, right? But my question is, if you had to put, is there a particular type of music that you're drawn to making, or is it many kinds?
Yes, it would be typically electronic music, but there's so many layers to that, and I'm always expanding, always interested in pushing the boundaries of my interest in music, and surrendering to other people and their interests and seeing what can come of those collaborations. So while I do have my preferences, my strengths in certain areas, and there's, it's usually I love dancing, so it usually it is in or around house music. But more and more, I'm exploring the more spiritual side of that and bringing more emotion to my music, you could say. And I guess, with the whole Soul Sing project, I know, sorry, I didn't get explained this. This all kind of was inspired by my friend who passed away. And it was me telling a story of surrendering to the unknown. And that story is still unfinished, but it was also me being creative in telling a story, but also launching an album at the same time. So that album is still ongoing and will probably come into a different form before the end of 2021. I'm trying to, when I go through this process and putting myself out there publicly, making myself accountable, again, coming back to the setting deadlines and goals, that kind of works for me, that accountability to a certain extent. But it is just surrendering into the now, trying not to be too fixated on the end result. And I think it's a lot more exciting and fun. It doesn't always work that way. So that's the musical and production side of Soul Sync. And then I've just this year, I'm halfway through a creativity coaching course with Eric Maisel. And I've another couple of courses lined up throughout the year. And what I'm doing, if anybody is listening to this, I'll be, between now and March, I'll be offering pro bono hours of coaching. So that basically, that if people would like to set up a discovery call, between now, I have to build up my hours, and I'm more than happy to work with people for free, a certain amount of people. So you better get in there quickly if you are interested. And yeah, we can have a discovery call and see if we're a good fit and go from there. And sorry, I forgot where I was supposed to go and all that.
That's all right. It was to ask you if you wanted to share anything else. So you've shared what came to mind.
Excellent. Oh, yes. Right. And my live gig is this Saturday. This is my first exploration into electronic music with spoken word. It'll be a small little thing. I don't know how it's going to work out online, but as we said discussed in our mastermind call, it's time 2021 to really step it up.
Yep. And so what's the name of your latest piece that you're about to launch?
Well, this week I'm just calling it the event Rise with Resilience.
Oh, wonderful name. Okay, Resilient Rob. Let's have a chat with our guests. I'm switching to gallery view. Michael and Adian, is that the name of your friend?
Adian.
Michael and Adian are invited to open up your mic, turn on your video if you would like. And let's have a chat with Rob, ask him any questions, have a conversation with him.
Hey Rob, how are you? Thank you so much for for speaking from inside you, and, you know, really being authentic and letting it flow. And I just want to say thank you for also expressing self-trust and getting to know you over the last few years, and how you have inspired me to really tap into the magic of flow. You know, if I could sum up you in a small little kind of thing, I just want to thank you for allowing me to really understand what the word synchronicity is, and listening to Soul Sync evolve, and having the benefit of being part of Soul Sync with you, you know, and just really you embodying the synchronicity and the magic of what each present moment can evolve for you, and being present more within that, you know. But I guess I have a little kind of question for you, and I would love a little small tip from you. I know this answer can be very multi-layered and monstrous, and maybe it's a hard question, but I would love to get a little tip from you on how to tap into this creative expression more, you know, for you know, living in sync and living in flow, all magic, and it's beautiful, but how do you tap right into that, your own creative expression? Have you got any tips for me?
Yes. Thank you, Aideen. Marcia, Aideen is actually one of the collaborators on the project. So she's just a beacon of light now in my life since I've got to know you. And so thank you for that nice share. So I think first of all, it's understanding, you know, what flow is, and how people, there's a certain comprehension around it. So I think very much being present with yourself, surrendering, getting out of your head, getting more into the body, getting more into the feeling state. And there's obviously, there's so many different layers to it. But again, and it comes back to also trust, you know, trusting that once you are out of your head and you are in that state of flow, that's where magic can happen. Because when you're in the flow state, try and stay in there for as long as you can, and even take that energy with you into other things that might be a little bit more mundane. So sometimes I will, when I have to do some work that I find really difficult, I will get myself into a state of flow to carry that energy into it. So I can, I'm able to get through stuff more efficiently and faster. And we know this, Aideen. We've done breath work before, and we've thrown ourselves into the Irish Sea. So these are all just ways, and being around people, obviously, you can buzz off their energy. You take that flow and you bring it to whatever aspect of your life, and it's really a beautiful thing once you start seeing the results and seeing, okay, I know what my flow triggers are. I'm going to use this and use it across so many different domains.
It's like that inner fire that just kind of continues, you know?
This is it, the inner fire.
Help you going. Yeah. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Aideen, for the question.
Rob, what would you say the role of intuition is in finding your creative flow?
Wow, it's such a big question.
You spoke about, you know, get out of your head and get into your body, and that's one part. But a lot of the time, you speak about intuition, and letting that guide. So I'd love to hear how that fits in as well.
Well, intuition, I've only really started trusting my intuition consciously. Like intuition is like almost like, you know, it just happens and we don't really pay attention to it. But now I'm starting to pay attention to my intuition, and obviously intuition is so entangled with your rational mind as well. And it is very tricky to separate the two, but and sometimes when, so I guess for me, and this might be interesting for actually Aidan, I've been using external signals such as synchronicity, through numbers, through nature, through conversations, through different people. When I ask a question, and all of a sudden I'd have a conversation and somebody would speak back to me. And what that is doing, what that tells me, is reinforcing my intuition. It's reinforcing, the lack of trust I have. So this is happening over and over again. What I feel, and this is anecdotal at this point, like I'm still very much exploring the relationship between synchronicity and intuition, at least with myself. But intuition, if you are living in fear, if you are always like stressed, you're not going to be able to tap into the intuitive nature of your soul, your gifts. And so it's really about, for me, addressing those fears, looking into your shadow and doing the work, because that's what needs to happen first before you can really start. Well, for me, in my experience, really start trusting your intuition and getting a better hold of what's happening and how your inner and outer world merges.
Yeah, very true.
Okay, Adi and Michael, any last questions or comments you all would like to share?
Mm-hmm.
We thank you all for being here so much. I'm switching back to speaker view.
Thank you, guys.
And I'd like to give just a quick summary of all that we have heard from. It's a hard job to summarize the rich interview that we've just had with Rob. Rob has had quite a challenging time in his life. He's told us about his mental health challenges, which started in childhood, which were not diagnosed until your 30s, Rob. And how having those challenges really gave him a difficult setup in a school system, because he didn't understand himself. He didn't understand why he was behaving or feeling the way he was. And when he was on the receiving end of, I guess, judgment or mistreatment at school because of his behaviors, it led him to become quite an angry and unsettled person. And that went forward with him into his young adult life. Even while he was struggling to find out who he was and what was interesting to him and what he was meant to do, he was somehow drawn, and I think it was his intuition, drew him to start exploring self-help, exploring what interested him, to start making music, to start going into the club scene with friends and making music. And without knowing it, because he had a 9-to-5 job, without knowing it, he was already touching on what his big purpose was. But it took him another 10, 15 years before he would actually recognize what his life passion was, and to turn that passion into clarity about his massive transformative purpose. He spoke about an MTP, and that's what it stands for, massive transformative purpose. So he has now connected his passion with his purpose, and he has given himself permission to be different, to be imperfect, to shape the way he lives his life to what his needs are. And that's the way we all should be. So in chunks, he steps into living his passion and purpose so that he can healthily move forward and do this sustainably. That's a huge, huge lesson. A million huge lessons. But to end, I celebrate Rob's recognition that he is enough and that all he needs to do is take one step every day. And I wish Rob the best as he steps into launching his next event. And I remind you all of his invitation to come to his website. Remind us of the website, please, Rob, just the name.
It's soulsync.life. That's soulsync.life. And if you'd like to just get updates on events like this, just head down to the footer of the website and pop in your email, and you'll receive an occasional email from me on what I'm up to.
And I remind you of the other wonderful offer that Rob has given us, that he is offering free coaching sessions for the first few people who come. I consider it a benefit for those who watch the video. So, Advantage, share this video with other people so that Rob can coach to help you to bring out your creativity more. So, Rob, it has been such a pleasure to interview you. I wish you all the best going forward.
Marcia, the pleasure is all mine. I'm really grateful for you giving me this opportunity, and I'm really honored. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to do it, my friend. And I look forward to seeing you grow and shine the way you're meant to.
Thank you. And we'll be talking soon, no doubt.
Okay. So readers, have a wonderful day. All the best to you all as well.
Thank you all. See you now.
Okay. So